There's a possibility that tonight or at some point in the near future, Donald Trump may declare a state of emergency. So, I wanted to learn what that means and how it all works. So with us is the counsel, the attorney of the Liberty and National Security Program at the Brennan Center. His name is Andrew Boyle. BrennanCenter.org is the website. You can tweet him at J_Andrew_Boyle, B-O-Y-L-E, or at Brennan Center. Prior to the Brennan Center, he spent 7 years prosecuting senior Khmer Rouge leaders on behalf of the UN for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, following a year serving in the trial chambers of the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, working on cases from that 1994 genocide. And pretty amazing stuff here. Andrew, it's an honor to have you with us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. So what is a state of emergency? I know that we've got something like 30 or 40 of them that are in existence right at this moment, that this goes back quite some time, maybe even to World War II. What's the history of these? What does this mean? And what would the consequence of Donald Trump declaring one be? I'm assuming there's all different, there's a whole gradation of different types of states of emergency.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. States of emergency currently are declared under something called the National Emergencies Act, and that was an act passed in 1976. And there are currently 31 active emergencies under that act. It's not, however, the case that when a president declares a national emergency, he automatically gets to do whatever he wants. All it does is then give him access to certain statutory powers that Congress has passed over the time and said that the president has access to these when he declares a national emergency. And obviously, in the current circumstances, what he is considering is using some of these specific statutory powers to, from his perspective, hopefully allocate money that he wasn't able to get Congress to pass to build the wall on the southern border.
Okay. So what does that mean?
So that means that if the president were to go down this path, he could declare a national emergency. He would have to formally transmit that to Congress. And he would also have to identify which of these specific laws. So there's 136 laws that he would have access to. When he declares a national emergency, he would have to identify which of those specific laws he intends to use. And then he could try to use the specific provisions of those laws to move money around. However, almost certainly this would be challenged in at least a couple of ways. First of all, there's a provision in the National Emergencies Act of 1976 which would allow Congress to terminate the national emergency. However, they would have to have a veto-proof majority in order to do that, because almost certainly President Trump would try to veto any act that they would pass to try to terminate that emergency. The other way is through litigation. There would almost certainly be plaintiffs that would come forward that would challenge the use of both the declaration of the national emergency, claiming that this was not a true national emergency, for example, because immigration is at historic lows, and also the use of the particular statutory powers to, say, move money around from Army civil works projects to building the wall.
So does he, if he declares a state of emergency largely for the purpose of moving money around, does that give him access to a whole range of new powers, arguably even extra constitutional powers that he might not have otherwise had?
It does give him access to the specific laws that Congress has passed over time, wherein they have said when the president declares something along the lines of when the president declares a national emergency, he can X, Y, Z. It doesn't give him access to just do whatever, the ability to just do whatever he wants at that point. But of course, the Congress, when it passed the National Emergencies Act, was assuming that we would have a president that would act in good faith, a president that would use these powers in true emergencies for limited amounts of time. And under the current circumstances, if the president were to try to use emergency powers to allocate money that he was not able to get Congress to allocate, it would be a clear violation of the spirit, if not the law, of the National Emergencies Act. and the powers under which he has access to under that act.
What are the most concerning of those XYZs? I mean,
Yeah.
he's not going to have the power to suspend habeas corpus, is he? Is he going to have the power to toss people in Gitmo that he doesn't like? I mean, what can he do that we should be really worried about?
Right. No. So the ability to suspend habeas corpus is clearly allocated to Congress in the Constitution. So that is not one that he would have the ability to do under the National Emergencies Act. There are quite troubling statutory provisions, however. For example, there are statutory provisions that would allow him to take control of radio stations, as might be particularly concerning to someone in your situation. There are also statutory powers that would allow him to perform biological and chemical tests on unwitting American citizens. And in addition, there are powers that would allow him to essentially prevent anyone within the United States or an American citizen even from being employed, from earning a living of any sort, from being able to have a home or rent a home. So there are some quite dire circumstances that some of these powers.
So he could basically individually designate you, Andrew Boyle, or me, Thom Hartmann. He could say, "Okay, Hartmann, I didn't like what you said on the radio yesterday. You are not allowed to engage in commerce anymore." It sounds to me like that's what you're saying. You know, your bank is going to freeze your accounts. Your landlord is going to kick you out. You can't rent a house. You can't buy a car. You can't do anything. You are no longer a person. Is that what you're talking about?
That is what I'm talking about, and in fact, although that particular law, that's called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, is routinely used in terms of foreign citizens, it has been used against individuals within the United States. However, there would be clear due process concerns if it was used against an American citizen, because as an American citizen, you have certain rights that foreigners located outside of the country do not have. And in fact, when that law has in the past been used to target persons within the United States, when it went up to the appeals courts, the government stopped using it against people within the United States because they were concerned about the constitutionality of what they were doing.
But under a state of emergency, those concerns would go away or be diminished?
Under a declared state of emergency is the only way that he has access to those powers. But certainly, it's true that in any sort of legal challenge, when you're dealing with the courts, courts historically have been very deferential to the executive, to the president, when he's using powers under a claim of national emergency. And that's a troubling aspect of the way that emergency powers can be used generally.
Remarkable. Finally, as a prosecutor of basically war crimes, I mean, you spent 7 years prosecuting Khmer Rouge leaders and prior to that, Rwandans. And those were substantial genocides. I mean, my recollection is around 2 to 3 million people were killed by the Khmer Rouge, and hundreds of thousands in the Rwandan genocide. I'm wondering if, in your opinion, any of the things that have happened here in the United States in the last, say, decade and a half or two, let's say 2 decades, going back to 9/11. So that it would include, things like the black sites, Gitmo, torture, or for that matter, now we've got 48,000 people who have committed no crime at all. They've come to the United States applying for asylum, who are in long-term, perhaps indefinite detention in these concentration camps, 2/3 of which are owned by private corporations. We've got several thousand children that the administration says now they have lost, and they cannot afford the manpower. It would take over 100 people, researching their cases to find them, and the administration doesn't have the money to do that, they say. I mean, is any of this stuff rise to the level of attention from an international criminal court?
Well, there's certainly a sliding scale. I don't believe that the United States is anywhere near the types of atrocities that transpired in either Rwanda or in Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge. But you're absolutely right that there's incredibly troubling human rights violations that have transpired in recent years and in former years, including torture. And the United States, it seems, recently is also taking a step back in being a leader in human rights in the world, and the way that the government is embracing autocrats around the world, encouraging autocrats, not only in relation to crimes against humanity or something like that, but also in relation to human rights such as free speech, democracy, things like that. And I would absolutely hope that in the coming years we see the United States return to its place at the forefront of human rights in the world.
Yeah, amen. It would be a fine thing. Andrew Boyle is the counsel of the Liberty and National Security Program at the Brennan Center. BrennanCenter.org is the website. You can tweet him at J_Andrew_Boyle, B-O-Y-L-E. Andrew, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Thank you for having me.
It's great talking with you, and great getting an authoritative voice on these issues that can be sometimes a little convoluted or